Welcome to another museum FAQ video. I'm Paul Orselli, President and Chief Instigator of POW, Paul Orselli Workshop, here on Long Island. Although my background, just to amuse myself, is Detroit, that has a connection to both myself and my guest, Jason J. Stevens. Hello, Jason. How are you today?
Very good. Nice to see you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. So I always like to start out, Jason, by giving the guests a chance to just talk a little bit about their background, because as is often the case, people's paths are not are not lined up as neatly as the streets in Detroit. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about your background.
Very straight.
Well, yeah. Actually, the street plan of Detroit is like spokes on a wheel. It's French, you know, Jefferson and Grand River and Gratiot. I mean,
okay, they're straight, but they aren't parallel, which even causes born and raised Detroiter a lot of consternation.
Like spokes on a wheel. But there you go. Hopefully we haven't lost viewers there as we've delved into that historical aside to Detroit, an important city. What we want to talk about today is, Jason, we want to hear about your background, and then we are going to launch into the main conversation. So take it away with your background a little bit.
Well, I was born in the city that is your background, Paul.
Me too.
Yes, we share this in common. And as I sometimes say, exhibit design is the last refuge of a scoundrel. I think it applies in my case.
Oh, I say flip labels are the last refuge of a scoundrel. But
no. And my 9-year-old daughter one day, just last summer, said, "You know, Dad, I know that you're trying to design things to be interactive, but flip panels aren't really interactive. And sometimes I see them in a museum and I don't even want to lift them up. I don't care what's underneath." And so I said, "Sweetheart, sometimes we have to resort to flip panels."
No. That just proves what a superior child. I mean, obviously genetics from your wife into your child there, and she's clearly not a scoundrel. But again, I digress. Tell us about your background.
Well, I did go to college for art until my parents saw my first report card and said, "Oh, you can move back home if you'd like, or change your major," which caused me to bounce around majors. I ended up with the art form that some parents for some reason accept, which is a writing degree. But immediately out of college, I went to work for a sculptor in Kalamazoo, Michigan, who happened to be doing a job for Jeff Bernstein Exhibit Designs, who you may know. And so my first job in the museum field right out of college was helping Blake Ketchum make Michigan prairie flowers at 10 times their actual size for the Kalamazoo Nature Center. And it's basically been museum work ever since. I also have dabbled quite a bit in the art world, making interactive artwork and multimedia work, a lot of video, and a lot of computer programming, and have been able to, through my career, join those two streams of my life into one stream, more or less, which is very gratifying. I eventually, long story short, ended up at the Ann Arbor Hands-On Museum as an exhibit designer there, and designed lots of exhibits there, some of them still there. In 2006, me and my wife moved to San Antonio, Texas, and that's when I started out on my own and started designing and building exhibits for clients. Initially as Jason J. Stevens Studio, but I like the idea of having a name for my company that wasn't connected to me, so we changed it to Flutter and Wow Museum Projects, and have since moved back to Michigan and are now located in Ann Arbor. We do work all over the country, but it's nice to be here in Michigan. So,
man, it all comes back full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well,
and we both also have connections to the Ann Arbor Hands-On Museum and Texas.
Oh.
So what a strange and wonderful world we live in. And that's a good segue into what no doubt will be a strange and wonderful conversation
Yes.
between ourselves.
Yeah, Paul, we actually share a lot in common. I don't think I don't think we're our biographies share a lot in common. I don't know that if we were
Yeah,
sitting in
that's
a room
about
with somebody else, they would
just
think
on that's right, just on paper,
just on paper. Yeah,
they'd say, what do these two have to do with each other?
Yeah,
Um, but that's the museum business in a nutshell. Maybe
sure,
you're like,
sure.
how did these people, like how did these people actually create things together? Like they don't seem to have anything to do with each other. But and
Big scoundrels.
that in and of itself may again be a good segue to our main conversation, which we want to talk about since we are videoing this, we are recording this during pandemic times, as they say, where the whole world, the whole world has sort of been put into a box. The whole world has had a pause button pushed on it. So I want to start this conversation because you, like me, are an independent museum professional. You're a business owner. You work with museums. You develop creative projects. People hire us for our brains, ostensibly, our brains for rent. Like how in the world do we sort of escape from these boxes? People always talk about think outside the box. If ever there was a time to think outside the box, now might be that time. And it's sort of brought into sharp relief as I mentioned before we started recording. There is this sort of I'm going to say self-fulfilling prophecy or doomsaying that says, up to a third of museums in the US may close permanently. I don't even know where that comes from. Their crystal ball, let me just state for the record, their crystal ball is no clearer than mine. Although, who knows, however many months from now, when people view this and they'll say, wow, exactly 1/3 of museums closed, then I'll just erase this part of the video. No, I won't. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, both as a creative person who's worked in museums, person who continues to work with museums and is a business owner, all of those things. Like, what do you think about this? Like, how can we get ourselves out of the box? How can we rethink or creatively think our way outside the problem? I mean, in a positive way, perhaps. And then I promise I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
In a positive way, perhaps, constraints and creativity are sort of often intertwined. And so we have a lot of constraints now. And so how can we apply some creativity to these constraints?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because my week actually has been very much dealing with constraints and coming up with some creative solutions to sudden problems that have popped up on a project that we are working on. There is an exhibition project happening in Detroit. We're going to open next month. With Science Gallery, which many people have probably heard of, based out of Dublin, but there are now science galleries all over the world.
We can, as they say in YouTube land, include links and references in the description below. So
yeah. So it's funny when people mention the thinking outside of the box thing. I often respond, "Where's the box?" That box is inside of a box. That is probably inside of a box. It's inside of a box. Its boxes all the way down. So thinking out of a box sometimes means thinking inside of a different box. The box is very dark, and in this case, like you alluded to, nobody has a crystal ball that really goes much further than a couple days from now. That is really difficult to wrap a human mind around. And in fact, one thing that I've discussed with a lot of people over the last couple of months is the intellectual hurdles of just trying to grasp the scale of this particular disaster. You know, the hurricane comes, and I know there are people who are still grappling with the damage hurricanes have done years ago. But, and so definitely we experience disasters that have a long scale to them. But it's outside of my experience. And it's this entire pandemic, I think every week my mind opens up a little bit more to the possibility that we could still be here doing this a year from now, 18 months from now. Whew. The reality of that is really tough to grapple with, and all of the implications. Thinking out of the box is one thing. You know, we do a lot of history exhibits. History is one of my, hobby isn't the right word, but it's one of my fetishes. And so I look at like the Spanish flu pandemic, another fetish. And not that.
I'm gonna suggest the word avocation or interest.
Oh, avocation, that's wonderful. Yeah. And certainly, I think the payoffs are going to come to those who do think on longer term. We definitely, as a company, have talked a lot, and in fact, even done some proposals for doing some barriers for an art school, local art school, hand sanitizer stations. I personally am not super interested because I didn't get into this business to, you know, I was doing 10 size or Michigan Prairie flowers 10 times their natural size. That's what interests me much more than hand sanitizer stations. Although long-term thinking, maybe that is an opportunity I need to be open to.
Giant Michigan Prairie flowers that distribute hand sanitizer.
Thank you. Where were you on the last?
Just a thought. Just a thought.
We've been discussing lately thinking more long-term and trying to think beyond the pandemic and how we can survive at a smaller scale to hopefully still be around, frankly, when the pandemic is over. Because whether or not 30% of the museums close down, and I pay very little heed to that kind of talk, the real statement out of that is that there are a lot of museums struggling and
museum people.
And museum people struggling for sure. And I think another reality is we have no idea what charitable giving is going to be like over the foreseeable future. Museum attendance for those museums have opened seems to be very positive, but it's on such a limited thing, and we're looking at it through the lens of having been shut down for several months, so the metrics are all way off. Uncertainty is the one thing we can be certain about. So how we can position ourselves to stay afloat, keep ourselves busy, and be positioned well for when the pandemic's over, and really trying to help everyone to get back to normal. And that's really what I'm impatient for, and I think it's where my passion is, frankly, in this moment, is to look forward to getting back to normal. So a lot of our creative thinking is about how to keep doing what we do in some kind of limited capacity so we can keep on going.
So let's talk specifics a little bit. I mentioned, you know, that oftentimes with constraints comes, you know, that provides impetus for creative solutions. I think you touched on something else though that is important that I've spoken with coincidentally with Christian Greer, the CEO of the Michigan Science Center. And he was talking about it in a management context, but what he said, which I thought may be relevant to this conversation, is that you have to acknowledge that in any organization, there are people who are really concerned about having a foundation, a stability to build from, and a level of certainty. And then there are these people who are like, oh man, this is great, pandemic, we can do anything now, let's go, I've got all these great ideas. But you know, you need constraints and creativity, you need stability and pioneer thinking. So Maybe you could share a few things, you know, maybe related to the project you're working on, or maybe related to how you are now operating your business that might be useful things for people who are watching this to take away for their own practice or their own situation.
I appreciate that question. I would not offer advice to anybody because this is my first pandemic. And
maybe hopefully for all of us our last, you know, like maybe they come in 100-year cycles, but well, I mean, I understand, but it's still, it would be interesting to know what you are doing, and then what people take away from your descriptions of what you're doing is up to them.
Well, let's come back to a Science Gallery Detroit, especially since that iron happens to be very hot, and when we finish this call, I have some more work to do on it. So, and it is happening just up the street from where you are right now, Paul. Literally less than a mile up Michigan Avenue, at the 1001 Woodward Building, which is a Dan Gilbert building. I don't know how much you know. Dan Gilbert is, for those of you who don't know, is a very successful businessman based in Detroit. He founded Quicken Loans and made his fortune off of that, and has proceeded to buy all the buildings that are on sale in downtown Detroit. So he owns a lot of real estate. And not to digress into talking about Dan Gilbert and the pluses and minuses of having his personality in our city, but he has done a lot to try and foster culture happening in places that have not seen a whole lot of it of late. And so he is providing this space to Science Gallery Detroit to do this art exhibition called Future Present, Design in a Time of Urgency. It's an interesting title that was actually decided upon many months before the pandemic, coincidentally. And I should note, when I was given the job and told that was the theme of the show, and is also my MO in this process, is to design in a time of urgency. So I, just like the artists who are exhibiting, am spending a lot of time thinking about designing in a time of urgency. And of course, what we're doing is designing an art exhibition that will be open to the public in a time of pandemic, in a city that got very hard hit. And unlike a lot of places in the country, I think, well, I'm not judging or anything, but Detroit is taking the pandemic very seriously, if I may generalize about the people of the city. A lot of people have been touched by it in some tragic ways. So that's an amazing challenge. And it forced me to think out of the box, Paul. And where I was another box, but it was a fantastic new box I'd never been in before. I started designing an exhibit with aspects to it that I have long said I would never design. For example, I've maybe designed 100 exhibits over the course of my career so far, of various scales. I'm not sure a single one of those was a single path exhibition where the visitors must follow a single course. I've always advocated very strongly, using myself as a good example of a museum visitor who, when put on that single course, always looks for ways to subvert it, always wants to turn around and start walking the opposite direction. So I've always designed exhibits that.
So what are you doing then? So you're someone who your own bias is anti-linear pathways.
Exactly.
But now here's your constraint. Well, if we're going to let people in this space, we need to control the flow of people so that they're safe and they feel safe. We're respectful of them. Exactly. So what did you do, or what are you doing?
And to meter people. Well, we designed an exhibit that has a single pathway, and there's let me describe the conceptual conceit that we're going on, because it all ends up, it satisfies me immensely, and I'm over my reticence about this single pathway because of the concept. So the space is a large open space with 30-foot ceilings, lots of windows, and a lot of the work that's going in the gallery requires some isolation, whether it's from light because it's video or something that just needs some darkness or some shadow, and of course sound, which is a very common exhibit design problem, how we isolate sound, negotiate volumes of different sounds in the gallery, and there will be live audio sources from very different kinds of audio sources. So we've had to build walls. We had no choice but to build walls. I would like, again, in a COVID time, to have no walls so people can feel the openness of the space, but we couldn't do that. So, to cut to it, the walls that we designed are slanted. They slant away from the viewer. And when looked at as a unit, each of these wall units, they very much bring to mind a barrier, like a Jersey barrier, or maybe even the section of a border fence. And so the layout of the exhibit is these sections of border wall that look as though they were laid in the gallery to deny access to people. But then somebody has come in and nudged them around a little bit so that we can get in. And then we hung an art show on it. So there's a kind of feel to this show like we're reusing these objects that are very much in the news for a reason besides COVID, because of all the protests that are happening in urban centers around the country and really around the world. And you're seeing these barricades being used to deny people access. So we're very much going for this idea of blocking people off, but then pushing things away. And we're adding color in places so it feels like, the people in the streets have taken over. And we're putting art up, and it's our space now. We're in occupied territory.
So that's really interesting, because we start this part of the conversation about the design, and you sort of wanting to both at the same time rebel against pushing people through a linear pathway, but acknowledging that you need to have some sort of control over the flow of people because of that. But then inherently, in this sort of constraint, you're making a sort of transgressive or rebellious sort of look and feel to the space, even though people are in a way constrained in some ways. So that's interesting.
Yeah. A lot of other advantages to it. The walls tilting back because the ceilings are so high in the space, and we can't build any ceilings ourselves. I'm hoping there will be a sense of openness. Because the walls tilt back, the floor space in any given area is smaller than your ceiling space. So a lot of the design is trying to achieve a sense of openness and airflow. And that's, again, comes back to one of my own concerns in quarantine. I feel very anxious when I'm enclosed in spaces for I think very practical reasons. So we're trying to take this enclosed space and make it feel less so. Another thing is that if you can visualize with me what a barricade looks like, Jersey barriers that run down the median and the highway. If you're trying to build a four-sided room out of those, for example, the corners don't really come together because of the slanting walls, right? So we won't have any enclosed spaces, and all of the semi-enclosed spaces, the corners will have big gaps, which again, a year from now, if you'd said, Jason, at some point in the future, you're going to design an exhibition where none of the corners come together in any of your enclosed spaces, I'd say, BS, I'd never do that. That sounds awful, but in this particular case, it's wonderful. It'll hopefully, and I feel pretty confident about it, give people the sense that you're enclosed, but there's lots of permeation in the space, so you don't feel trapped. There's lots of escape routes and airflow, and so hopefully that it'll all blend into a wonderful unified design.
We'll stay tuned, and again, any links or references to the work, your work, that project, that would be cool. Speaking of escape routes, I'd just be interested in terms of how you are thinking, and you can just say that. That's nice that you're interested, Paul. I'm not going to talk about this on this video, but since we are both small business owners making our way in the world, such as it is, I'm just wondering how you might be dealing with the constraints and the challenges that now owning a business, running a business attached to the museum ecosystem, what that is like, and if there are, again, other sorts of solutions or things that you're sort of playing with in terms of your business. And again, what people take away from that, they can take away from it what they will. But if you wouldn't mind, I'd be interested just on the pure business level, what this is meaning for you now. What boxes or constraints are you dealing with, and how are you dealing with it?
Well, I'll tell you, one thing, a personal trait that turns out to be very valuable now, but in previous times has always been something I've personally been trying to overcome, is, and I've kind of alluded to my history as, somebody who's kind of hacked his way into his career and comes up through art and punk rock and has never felt certainty. My life has always been uncertain. Even when times are good for my company and we've got lots of jobs and a lot going on, my brain never processes it that way. I always think, in fact, I say things to employees that are kind of wrong, like, well, I don't know where we'll be in 6 months. We might not have any work. And then what? And of course, employees who are relying on something steady and to pay rent in 6 months get horrified that their boss.
Pro tip, don't say that to your spouse. I don't know. I don't know what kind of work we'll have in 6 months.
Oh, we've been talking about it. So that's another conversation, Paul. Spousal relations in a time of pandemic. So here we are in pandemic, and it's uncertainty is the order of the day. And so I'm conditioned to accept that to some, so we don't know where we'll be in 6 months. Yeah, what's new? That's the way it's always been. It's just a little more concentrated now. Now it's not just the uncertainty in my mind. It's like the psychologist who lives next door to me. I was talking to her, and her business has been doing really well because she has a lot of, and I don't mean this thing. She has a lot of paranoid schizophrenics as clients, and she's been continuing to have sessions with them on Zoom, and they have never been doing so well because something has materialized to give them, something to be paranoid about, and it's real, and it pays off to be paranoid. You'll survive this thing if you're paranoid. So these traits, every 100 years, nature throws something at us that shows us why these traits have evolved in the human psyche. So there's that. Comfort in uncertainty. I could go on and on about that.
I think it's
a business trait.
I think it's interesting. I think to a certain degree, that notion of comfort in uncertainty, like if you're taking a snapshot moment by moment of your business or your bank account, you might be like, oh, this doesn't look good. But then if you say, oh, but let's look at the entire year. Oh, okay, it kind of goes like this, but okay, we come out okay at the end, and then we start a new year, and that.
That's right.
And I'm thinking that, that is difficult for the people, the aforementioned people. I was telling you about Christian Gear, the people in an institution or a family or a business who are looking for certainty. Jason, Paul, tell me what the next 5 years worth of jobs you have lined up. That's
Yeah.
not how, that, like, I understand why you are asking that question, or, you know, on an institutional level, tell me what the 5 year plan of certainty is. Like, again, I understand you're a board member, you're a funder, you are an employee, you are committing yourself to an institution, a business, an idea, an exhibition. But yeah, I mean, at a certain level, you have to say, I understand why you want that level of certainty, but I can't give you that. No one can give you that. And I mean, maybe just to come full circle, that is the problem. That is one of the challenges, although it seems to be a booming business for your friend, the psychologist, but that's an issue now in the world we live in. People want certainty. When can schools reopen? When can I go back to a museum or movie theater? When can I go back? Essentially, the question during this pandemic, when can I go back to the way things were before everything went to hell in a handbasket in March? And again, the answer is either I don't know, or it's probably unlikely that things will go back to exactly the way they were. And you know, if you have that mindset of looking for certainty, that's just not a good answer. That's not a good answer at all.
Well, a little preview of our future conversation about spousal relations during time of pandemic. My wife directs the Ann Arbor Film Festival, which, like museum work, relies on people getting together in real space and sharing space together and sharing experiences together. So she and I have been, you know, running along side by side and having these realizations. It's been very tortured for her to reach a point where they have to create their own certainty. There will be no in-person festival next year. Maybe there will be a vaccine. Maybe people will be vaccinated as early as February. But will people be comfortable coming to a theater? Let's say no, and try and build something in, you know, that can happen. So and this now bring it back to museum work. I think part of the stages of this building your consciousness of what life is like in pandemic, and I have to, because we're going to begin installing a museum exhibition next week. So we'll have a crew in an enclosed indoor space, using tools, working close together, wanting to take lunch together, but I think we're going to have to stagger lunch breaks, even though that's like my favorite part of the workday. It breaks my heart that I can't have lunch with my crew. I am that boss.
6 feet apart. 6 feet
Yeah,
apart.
maybe. And
you're in a big
exhibit.
exhibit. You're outdoors, but you're also in a big exhibit space outdoors.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, you know, a lot of it has to do with people's personal comfort levels, and we all, you know, we kind of have to go with everybody's personal levels. But the client has its own requirements and its expectations, and they of course want to know that we are behaving in a safe manner. And then we have the landlord, Dan Gilbert, to bring him back and what his company expects from us. You know, we'll be using their restroom, so everybody has to behave. It's a lot of negotiation of those kinds of tolerances, along with guidelines, in as much as those are provided in any cohesive way from any particular entity, whether it be government or the client. This has been a really interesting experience, and I've gone through a lot of cycles of anxiety about it, frankly, and whether it's even possible and if I can ask people to do it. Now, to come back to some like business model stuff, another advantage that Flutter and WoW has had for a long time that I've been proud of at different times, but at other times feel like this is a model we eventually need to outgrow. But we hire a lot of subcontractors, and in fact, I'm going to say that it's actually, by and large, been a wonderful way to operate. I hire people. It, I luck out so much in the people I hire. I really don't understand the art of hiring, but I've had such great success, and I've built such great crews. And part of it is because I hire somebody for like installation and building who has other gigs happening and who's interested in other kinds of work. And when they come work for Flutter and Wow, it's, you know, it's like bringing a wizard into our fold. Not some, and I'm not belittling people who work 40 hours a week for a particular job. You know, there's a lot of good in that too. But our having a pool of subcontractors in this environment has worked out good, because those folks have been able to apply for unemployment, those who have needed to, or have other gigs which are helping to supplement them. Joey, one of our main builder installers, who is a wizard by anyone's definition, is actually in Bulgaria right now shooting a Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel. Yeah, because apparently.
And we're going to pull in another one of my threads, the Bulgaria thread. You know, Bulgaria, just as an aside for everyone, Bulgaria has a very robust film and video and interactive digital design infrastructure. So many shows that are shown like on the Sci-Fi Channel or stuff, made in Bulgaria.
Well, and the coming Texas Chainsaw sequel, all those shots of Texas are apparently, Texas in 1970s looks a lot like Bulgaria today. So
looks like Plovdiv or Sofia.
Yes. I'm not exactly sure where he is. And I mean, that's a whole nother story. He flew out during one of these little windows when people could do that. And who knows when he will be back. But he's been lucky to get to do that. And I mean, anybody who's in the business knows having somebody who works in movies, that's a skill set that, you know, from lighting to how to, you know, problem solve on a dime is super valuable. So to say, we rely on a lot of subcontractors, and for this show that's coming up, it's great to be able to take some of them out of unemployment, and everybody's excited to get back to work, frankly, and we have a lot of fun together. So,
well, you know, it strikes me what you're describing about your business and what your wife, in terms of the Ann Arbor Film Festival, and also I'll invoke Christian Greer again. I'm gonna do another YouTube thing. I'm gonna put a little info card so that you can go to Christian's previous conversation.
it's a good one.
That Christian and I had. Yeah, it is a really good one, because Christian's super smart.
Yes, and he's new in his position.
Yeah,
but another one of these people who've come on to a job at, wow, what a time to come on to a job.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The director of Science Gallery also came onto his job after lockdown. So his whole experience of this job has been in pandemic.
Well, it just seems, though, that a common thread, and it resonates with me, is that you can sort of drive yourself batty thinking about all the scenarios, you know, that we really don't have certainty about.
Oh, I do that. Yeah.
Or you can, as Christian said, or your wife said, you know, we are going to make our own certainty. We're going to stand in this spot, and Godzilla's going to come to us. The tornado's going to come to us. The crazy alien invasion is going to come to us. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from Bulgaria is going to come to us. But the thing is, you know, that is the certainty that people need. It's like, okay, this 3 square feet that I'm standing on, I know the ground is solid below me. I know what I can face, and I'm prepared for whatever comes my way. And I'm just making my stand right now. And I think what you just described about your business and what your wife mentioned about Ann Arbor Film Festival, what Christian mentioned about Michigan Science Center, it very much resonates with me. You know, let me make an area of certainty that, then everything else comes to me, whatever that is. I don't even know what that is, but this is the place I'm making my stand. So maybe that's a place to end.
Yeah. Well,
This conversation, you know, maybe that's something that I'll just offer to viewers, you know.
I would
What
say
is go ahead.
for myself that I don't know what that personal certainty is yet, and I'm watching others do that, but I don't think it's necessarily that easy. And not to give the wrong appearance, we, like a lot of people, are trying to figure out what we can do. Like maybe now this is the year to redesign the website, and so we are actively redesigning the website right now, in fact. So
Yeah, but that's another, that in and of itself is another way to provide a level and a feeling of both change and certainty.
Oh yeah. We've, and I as a business owner, lots of business owners talk this way, have always tried to keep my eye on work that's outside of our little niche, because museum exhibit design is very niche, very boutique-y. And even, well, and so I'm a designer, so you can't go out to eat with me without me looking under tables and, you know, examining light fixtures and everything. I've always wanted to do a restaurant, always wanted to do a retail. In fact, I talked to Nina Simon years ago because she had a little break in her career where she was thinking about opening a restaurant.
Yeah, like a bar, like a community bar or something.
Yes.
In a restaurant.
So, yeah. With games, I mean, it's so up my alley. It's so fun brainstorming on that project that never left the brainstorming stage.
Doesn't mean
you're listening.
Doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
No. I'm ready to pick that project back up whenever she is. Yes. So we've been talking a little bit about, you know, pushing out into that world. Of course, museums or restaurants and stores are very much in the same world as museums are right now. But it's an opportunity to look at what else could the company be, and when the pandemic is over, what do we want to be? So in as much as we have resources to keep dumping into that kind of strategic planning, we're doing that. I suspect a lot of companies are doing that. So it's probably not new.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna emphasize the word hopefully.
Yeah.
And end on a hopeful note here.
Oh, good.
By saying thank you, Jason. Always nice to speak with you. And at least we get to have this this digital conversation that we share with people. So I'm glad you took the time. And as I mentioned several times, I'm sure when we put this out on the Magic YouTube, we will include some references and links and things that people can find out about, additional information. So again, wishing you and your family and your business the best, and thanks again for taking the time.
Back at you. Thank you, Paul. Nice to see you in Detroit.
Thanks.